Good afternoon for everyone, and welcome to our panel, which focuses on the existing opportunities in the connections between regional relations and the Israeli-Palestinian relationship in order to promote a life of peace and prosperity in our shared space for all peoples here. There have been, as you know, and there still are those who have tried and are trying to separate regional relations from Israel-Palestinian conflict and to claim that lasting regional peace can be promoted without resolving the Palestinian issue. And if anyone needed a reminder, the events of October 7th and the Gaza war that followed once again demonstrated that it is impossible to separate the two. At Mitvim, we're taking a step forward and adding that it is also not correct. It is not right to separate the two. In order to promote a life of peace and security in the region, it is necessary to recognize the important place of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its impact on the relationship between Israel and the Arab states, and vice versa, to recognize the opportunities inherent in the relations between Israel and Arab states to promote Israeli-Palestinian peace. And in order to discuss this important nexus in light of the past year of bloodshed, we have invited here honored and dear guests, Palestinians and representatives from the regional states. All are partners in the efforts to build a sustainable reality of peaceful coexistence here in the region. We have the honor of hosting Dr. Naacer Alkiidwa, former Palestinian Foreign Minister and Ambassador to the United Nations, ex-Foreign Minister of Jordan, Dr. Jawad Anani, former Egyptian Ambassador Abdurrahman Tsalaah-Aldin, the founding Executive Director of the Principle for Peace Foundation, Ms. Hiba Csass, the CEO of Dubai Public Policy Research Center, Mohammed Baroun, and the Saudi Research Fellow from the Arab Gulf State Institute, Dr. Aziz Al-Ghashian. Thank you all for joining us. It is a great honor, and we greatly appreciate it. And before we shift our focus forward, looking for strategies of hope, let's first do a brief round and together establish the key insight gained from the past year. And I'd like to understand, with your help, what has happened here.
We are talking about a horrible situation. We are talking about a genocidal war. And we are talking about a war that is continuing because of a political decision by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. It seems that Mr. Netanyahu wants this war to continue because if it stops, he might be in real troubles, including maybe going to prison. So that is a very good reason for him to continue with this, and that puts all the region in very difficult situation, including, of course, not only the Palestinian people, but some regional powers such as Egypt and Jordan and beyond. The bottom line is to understand that while we are trying to improve our relationship as Arabs, maybe in the Gulf with Israel, at the same time, we need to advocate a reasonable solution for the Palestinian question, and that this should be an integral part of any improvement of relationship. Not believing for a second that improving relationship with some Arab countries can be a substitute for solving the Palestinian question.
We should learn a lesson that we should not go back again. And if we are going to use the motto never again, we should use it never to have a war again, where we agree on common ground that each should live in peace and integrity within their own territory.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It is actually my first appearance in an Israeli think tank, and I think I made this choice for a reason. I hope your institute will continue to stand for peace within the Israeli society, and you will get all the support that we can lend you from Egypt and from other Arab countries. I personally think that what happened on October 7th was the result of a miscalculation on the part of the Israeli government. There is always two scenarios to deal with the future of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I call one scenario is the Egyptian or Jordanian scenario, where Israel would withdraw from the land it occupied in 1967, agree on security arrangement that would guarantee the security of Israel and the others, and also grant the Palestinians their rights. And the other, of course, scenario is what Israel has been adopting since actually 1967, almost non-stop. But what seriously happened after 2005 and the Israeli pullout of Gaza was simply empowering Hamas and allowing suitcases full of cash to go into the strip and tolerating a low-intensity conflict with Hamas, with a crisis every year or so, and counting on Hamas to maintain the split between Gaza and the West Bank. So we would all forget about the two-state solution. I think the outcome was October 7th. I would say that the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt survived, and also Egypt was able to overcome the dissatisfaction and even anger over the Israeli initial call for Palestinians in Gaza to head towards Sinai. This was a grave mistake for the simple fact that this would jeopardize the peace treaty between the two countries.
So the reality is our people have not been more traumatized and have not been, on both sides, have not been more mistrusting of each other. So the psychological feasibility of a political solution has become much, much harder after the impact of this war. Just to conclude on what the impact of this past year, I think there's a lot of realities, the hardened public opinion, the level of the trauma, the lack of political will amongst the leadership are all impediments. But I think the renewed international attention, the realization that the status quo is not sustainable, and the strategic opportunity, the historic opportunity I think that Israel has right now with practically the Muslim world and the Arab countries saying that this is a time for normalization if and when Israel grants the Palestinians right to self-determination and statehood on the basis of the 1967.
Thank you, Rועי, and thank Mitzvim for the invitation. And what I appreciate is that we've always had honest and frank discussions, and I'm sure that this is not going to be a departure from that. When we're talking about the implications, I think what we need to pay attention to is the implications down the road. So not what's happening today, what will not happen tomorrow or happen tomorrow, but what could happen the next 2 years or 5 years if you want. And when this conflict erupted, I was telling people, rightfully or wrongly, but I was telling them that this conflict is going to let the clock in the region tick backwards. What really bothers me is that we're possibly not going to go backwards all the way to 48 when the all-over conquest of Palestine happened. We will possibly go way beyond that to the times where the Holocaust happened, because what we're seeing now is a huge resurgence of anti-Semitism. And this anti-Semitism, frankly, is being instigated by what is happening in Gaza. If you're asking me about the conflict implications, we're seeing a return to this big conflict between Jews, not only Muslims, but possibly with everyone else. And it's unfortunate considering everything we tried to do with the Abrahamic Accords, which is promote this idea that this is not a conflict between Muslims and Jews. It's a political conflict that needs to be addressed politically. Unfortunately, the lack of a political
process to address this is going to bring us back to this, and it's not going to stop at the region.
One of the things that was very concerning was leading up to October 7th, which was a discussion that was being framed as that normalization is the ultimate victory because it avoids peace. This is how it was being viewed, and that's what I found very concerning. And I think it goes back to your point that this was, that we cannot circumnavigate this issue. I know that there are people in Israel that do seek peace, and that's why we have to really begin to develop this relationship and institutionalize it. So I think what was happening leading up to it was a very concerning process of separating normalization from peace. The two concepts have never been so far apart, in my opinion. What were this idea of normalization all about? These gestures of peace. It looks like then there is no foundation of peace. There is a real willingness of normalization, but no foundation of peace. And therefore, it really made me realize and really believe that you can have normalization, but it doesn't mean you will get peace. And in my opinion, and I'll just finish with this, we need to securitize the lack of peace, because this is what's going to happen. If there is no peace in the Palestinian-Israeli front, given our connectivity, given our intention of trying to be really a region that's more interconnected, this means the spillover effects of that conflict is becoming more and more dangerous. It is dangerous. And I am personally very worried about extremism and terrorism all around the region.
At Mitzvim, we believe and try to promote the concept of evolving peace, meaning that there is no point in sitting idly and waiting until optimal political and diplomatic condition ripen for the completion of an Israeli-Palestinian peace process. We believe that we must do everything possible today, well, yesterday, actually, and begin building peace bottom up through establishing facts on the ground and from top down through diplomatic and political moves. And within such a conceptual framework, let's say, I would like to ask you, what concrete steps do you think are appropriate to promote at this time, under those conditions, with the challenges and the opportunities that we're facing, that would be both feasible, right, and highly effective in changing reality to the right direction? What role do you think that various Arab states have individually, but also collectively, in promoting such steps? What do you think should be the role of neighboring Arab states in maintaining the feasibility of the two-state solution, and in promoting, state building, Palestinian state building?
Listen, normally it's the Palestinian guy that would have the confidence of his colleagues, the Arab officials, and would lead the work towards having a common position at the Arab level, and then at the Islamic level, and then at the international level. This is not happening. This is not happening because this maestro does not exist, because of the very bad Palestinian situation. We have some kind of a group that is good for nothing in Ramallah, and we are having another group that are totally crazy in Gaza. So we need to change the Palestinian situation. We had attempted to provide some ideas in this regard, and somehow I probably made a big mistake by believing that we'll get some help and some assistance by Arab regime, which did not materialize. I was obviously wrong. But the bottom line, that why should they? Why should they help in creating a more effective Palestinian situation at the level of leadership that might be even more problematic? But nevertheless, let me say this. The weakness of the Palestinian situation means that we need Arab participation even more.
And I think that it's about time we should say, and we should enforce the fact, and we should really lobby with influential countries like the United States and so on, first of all, to put an end to this war. It's crazy, bloodshedding war. Secondly, I think we need, meanwhile, we need to create a structured, what I would call a track 2 dialogue. Thirdly, I think we need to begin to talk about developing, about being fair by eliminating the elements who are opposed to the peace process. They should exist as people, as opposition, and so on, but not to leave decision-making in their hands. Not in Gaza, not in Lebanon, and not in Israel. The fourth step that I really would envisage, and I agree with Naaser Qudwa when he said that, and Abdurrahman, I think, repeated the same idea, that we need to define the ultimate objective. There is no, we have been taught once and many times over, that without an objective, you cannot get there. Now, what is absent is not the objective. Everybody has an objective, but the agreement on a common objective. Let us do reverse engineering. Let's say, okay, we want to reach this point, and now let's see what time framework we need and so on, and begin to work on a matrix that would interchangeably, put a responsibility to take a positive step towards that end by everybody. And let us have an international tribunal who would really monitor that we're doing the right thing.
I believe we have a very good chance if these parties, the US, Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Palestinian Authority, of course, in bilateral tracks, because Israel doesn't have, for example, official meetings with some of like the Saudi officials. But we can work, like Dr. Jawad said, back channels, unofficial talks, things of that sort, that would work on the day after, would work on security arrangements after Israeli withdrawal. I have to be very clear here. No Arab countries can have a role to play on the ground in Gaza if there are still Israeli soldiers occupying Gaza. It would be Israel's problem. Using the famous word, you break it, you own it. Other partners who can be very helpful in the reconstruction of Gaza is the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Europe. I think there are other partners that we would need their help in not spoiling what we are trying to achieve. And here I name Iran. We need to have a message, a channel with Iran that would maintain the quietness. If we need a way out of this conflict, we need to focus only on the day after. And I see Egypt very well qualified to participate in this new quartet, or whatever you call it, US, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, but of course with the Israelis and the Palestinian Authority. Thank you.
We wanted peace and we wanted connectivity with Israel. Now, to go to your question, what does this mean to the UAE? Does that make the Abrahamic Accords go? The Abrahamic Accords, as I told you, is not about Israel. It's about the whole region. Now, when Israel becomes a problem to the whole region and it does not deliver peace and it does not deliver economy, then its status in this human body, we've talked about arteries, from a heart that pumps it, from an artery that allows the blood to flow, into an appendix. We will keep it if it doesn't make a problem. If it starts swelling and makes a problem, then we will have to take it out. So this is where we are now. This is how the value of the Abrahamic Accords for the UAE has shifted. It used to be an enabler for a wider peace. It is now a cause of a problem. And it's a very, very painful assessment to a lot of people here. But in my view, it's a factual assessment.
If we give this out-in approach, kind of, this is what we were hearing a lot of the times, like, well, let's normalize relations first, figure out this, and then kind of have this spillover effect into the Israeli-Palestinian issue. I think that was the intention. That was certainly the principle, but that in-out approach, because of people in the Israeli government and the political establishments, made it from out into out. And let's keep it out. Let's just, this is something that the Palestinian issue is something that can not only be postponed, but can be completely ignored. But now, given the constant coverage, people are becoming more and more aware of the iniquities of this kind of occupation and the dynamics of this and what has facilitated this and the process of management of this conflict and this balancing strategy of keeping the PA weak and keeping Hamas afloat. And Saudis are becoming more and more aware of this. When it comes to this calculation of the Palestinian issue, you know, I think the Saudis have to be are incredibly cognizant of what to ask for and insist upon having. Now, you mentioned something very important about the Trump administration, and I won't say he's given a sign. It's not America first. It's not even Israel first. The sign that the Trump administration gave with the first kind of initial appointments was Netanyahu first. This is what I think he was giving. He was giving these settlers, and he was suggesting and talking about annexation, etc. So I think we're in for a very, very difficult time. In my opinion, when it comes to, I think, what the Saudis ought to be asking for and what you guys should help us to help make more tangible and help make more clear is processes of not just insisting on the contiguity of a Palestinian statehood, but also the facilitation of Palestinian statehood. Now, everyone is talking about Israeli integration into the region, that this is something that could help Israeli integration into the region and normalization. And yes, that is true. But I don't think there's been enough discussion about facilitating Palestinian integration into the region. This is where I think when you start connecting these processes and connecting and institutionalizing this, is now offering a new way of thinking about the building blocks towards peace. Because you can't have a state without kind of institutions. And therefore, we should focus on building those institutions within a credible peace framework.
I mean, we need to learn from the mistakes happened in the previous processes, and one of them, I think, was the absence of the end result. Now we need to be sure from the beginning where are we heading and what is the end result. And in this regard, I think we can make the commitment public to the State of Palestine 1967 borders, while agreeing to have the mutual recognition actually happening maybe in 3 years or anything like that.
If we are going to build peace, I don't think that distorters of peace should be an active participant in the process. They can sit on the opposition, but not decision makers.
I think the main problem within Israel and I would say beyond even the Israeli government, is you don't want to recognize that there is 7.5 million Palestinians, and you don't know what to do with them. They are not going to disappear overnight. They are not going to go away by ethnic cleansing, and definitely you are not going to kill all of them through a genocidal crime. So Egypt will not receive them. Jordan will not receive them. And we need to find a solution that would make these two people, Palestinians and Israelis, to live side by side. I don't insist on the two-state solution, and neither does Egypt. But we found that the only possible solution to accommodate the political aspiration of the two people and also their security consideration. Otherwise, we would be left with either a one apartheid state, Israeli state, or a non-Jewish democratic one. And I think those two choices are not on the cards on the Israeli side. I know that there are some people already in Israel who are thinking and dreaming and getting ready to talk about sovereignty and annexation and extending Israeli rule to some parts of the West Bank, etc. I have to warn that this might work for a year, 2, 4 years, but it would produce another October 7th. Israel does not need to repeat those very painful lessons. Occupation would generate opposition and resistance, whether they are peaceful or would turn violent. And I think we need to avoid that. This vicious cycle of violence needs to break. And if Israel would make this commitment, believe me, it's not only Egypt. It's the whole Arab world is willing and ready to jump on the wagon and to widen the normalization to include everyone, not only the Saudis, but even beyond that. And I see the willingness and I see the interest. I hope that Israel would act on it.
I do agree that we need to focus about the day after, but I do believe that we need to work also now in preparation for the day after, because I do believe that there's a lot of work that we need to do while the political players are organizing from behind the scenes discreetly on building broad public support and legitimacy for a political solution, because the psychological feasibility is a very important one, and the political feasibility in blocking the very active effort of extremists to actually block and advance towards a solution. So the reality of the attempts of annexation of the West Bank, the expansion of settlements, there are things that need to happen now as we are preparing for the day after, that needs to block some of these extremist agendas from creating realities on the ground that push us further. So I would advocate for a 3x2 approach, 3 tracks of work focusing on an immediate ceasefire. And of course, there's a strong demand from Israelis for the release of the hostages, but that cannot be in isolation from something very important, which is resetting a political process. Because if we do that without resetting a political process with a clear, practicable path to a two-state solution, then we are losing the opportunity. And the third is really around how do we prepare now for the day after. So we need to work on these 2 time horizons, immediate and longer term. The Palestinian Authority need to cultivate its legitimacy with the Palestinian people. That can happen with the regional involvement, but it needs to be done in a way of accompaniment, supporting and building state institutions. The EU role is very, very important as well in this. I think we need to strengthen and enable the global alliance for the 2 states. I think that's a process that we need to collectively support and revive and enable. And there can be very concrete steps that can actually provide the security guarantees for Israel, support building the state institutions for the Palestinians, accompany very concretely the reconstruction and the humanitarian needs that are of magnificent proportions in Gaza, And the Arab countries in the region have a very key role in all of these areas, but I think they've made their stance very clear. They are not going to be the police force of Israel if there's no two-state solution. They are not going to fit the bill of reconstruction if there's a risk of complete destruction again. So I think the terms are becoming very clear right now, but it falls upon us, pragmatists on both sides, moderates on both sides, to see how we can block the extremists on both sides, because the biggest losers of a clear path towards a two-state solution is Hamas and the school of thought of Ben Gvir and Smotrich. The biggest winners of this are the Israeli and the Palestinian people, who will be breaking the cycle, this endless cycle of insecurity. The moment there is a practicable path to a two-state solution with clarity and clear timelines and a commitment, you will actually see a lot of people coming forward to engage and play a more active role. But it needs to be nurtured and supported.
What we need is a will from Israel to have a state, not a pressure from the community around Israel to force it into a state. Same thing would apply to the Palestinians. They should have a will for a state. Now, Dr. Al-Ghashian has mentioned the summit in Riyadh. The summit has practically put on the table. These are all of the countries in the region that want a two-state, including Iran. They want a Palestinian state, and they are willing to accept an Israeli state. Who is against this? Is it the US? Is it the EU? Is it, Brazil? Is it Argentina? Is it Africa? It's only Israel that's against this. So now we have a situation where Israel is threatening the entire global security with insecurity because of a political decision made by a few elected. Now, does those elected people represent all of the Israeli people? Talking to you, at least, I know it's not.
To conclude for now, the Israeli public is rarely exposed to the perspectives and insight of its most important neighbors, you. And we have a rare opportunity here that I want to utilize and ask each of you again to convey, one main message that would you like the public in Israel would hear and think about it.
That when we talk about the overall political solution in the form of two states, Israel and Palestine 1967 borders, we are not in a beauty contest. There is no other solution. So either it is the continuation of the endless wars and endless suffering, or a solution of which the only potential, the only possibility is the existence of the two states. We need to understand it this way. It is not maybe, yes, we will see. It's not like that. It's either the continuity of the war or the overall political settlements in the form of two states, and there is no other one.
I think to the Israeli public, I would say our futures are so profoundly interconnected. Israel's own quest for security and protection of its position as a startup nation, as a democratic nation, is very much intertwined with the Palestinian struggle for dignity and self-determination. I do believe that we share a bond of loss and intergenerational trauma, but I think the reality that we're both living, that this status quo is not sustainable. It's not delivering security to the Israelis or dignity or self-determination to the Palestinians. So we need to break this cycle. We need to move forward, and we are presented now with a strategic opportunity to actually forge a new path for the whole region, a new framework for the whole region that can actually emancipate our people from the reality of insecurity and the reality of occupation. And as someone who really dedicated the last 2 decades working on conflict prevention and peace building in many parts of the world, I've learned really one thing, that the path to peace is always shorter from the midst of pain and loss than from the status quo. And we're at that inflection point. So let's not lose this opportunity, and let's emancipate our people on both sides from this very brutal conflict. Thank you.
If we decide on both sides that we cannot eliminate the other 7.5 million people in historic Palestine. I think we need to make a historic decision to reconcile and to live side by side. And all my lifetime, during my lifetime, I was always confident that there was a majority in Israeli public opinion on the side of recognizing Palestinian rights. Today, I am told by my Israeli friends, peace advocates, that that's not the case anymore, that the majority of Israelis are against Palestinian national rights. That's for me is really a confession of failure as a diplomat and also as a person, as a human being. I hope that both the Israeli public and the Palestinian public would come to recognize the historic moment that we live in right now and grab it and make use of it. When they do, I think they will find us ready to help. Thank you.
I think that there is the current situation, and the perpetuation of this current situation is a double jeopardy. First of all, it's denying us the fruits of cooperation, and secondly, it is causing unnecessary waste and on adventures that would not improve the situation. So I believe that we should come to our senses, all of us, and sit down and build for peace. I believe that feelings change over time, and we need to build that confidence that we can live together in the future and live for the prosperity of all.
I'll give two advices. First advice, there is a consensus, except for Israel, on a Palestinian state. Even those who are not willing to act right now, they are acting not because they're refusing the idea, but because they think the circumstances are not right or the timing is not right. However, to have a Palestinian state, we would have it with Israel or without Israel. With Israel through negotiation, without Israel through other means, including, UN, whatever. And I understand a lot of people think that they do not care about the UN, they do not care about any. As long as the Israelis say no Palestinian state, then there will be no Palestinian state. And I'm warning here that don't be in the position of Marie Antoinette. Don't sit on that balcony. Think that because you're high on the balcony, no one is going to touch you. And I think this is a very important. You'll either be part of the game, help forge it, help conclude, or that game is going to move on without you. Second advice, and I'll take it from this idea of the 21st century that Aziz mentioned at the beginning. Concepts of national security has changed. Until now, Israel is thinking about security in the same way medievals have thought about it, which is erecting walls. Security in the 21st century, in the digital century, is going to be about roads, not walls. Israel is closing the roads that we've already opened. And if you want an example, look at IMEC. IMEC now is halting because of the wall Israel is building around itself rather than the road. So this idea between roads and is something, Israel has to think about it. Can they survive in a wall, in a colony around the region, or do they need walls across the region? So that's my second advice.
Keep maintaining the strongest thing that you have. And the strongest thing, in my opinion, that you have was not the military, was not the tech, was not the ingenuity, but it's the strong civil society in Israel. And I think there is really where I think the peace, the understandings, the recalibration of moving forward is based. I think the discourses have been talking over each other and not with each other. And this is the thing that I've written with mitvim, with you guys. There has to be this kind of healthy discussion that changes, and this is one thing, that changes the culture of Arab-Israeli discussion.
And you pointed also about one very crucial thing that we in Mitvim try to promote is not to neglect the past or ignore the past, but we also have to derive our current actions from the future we want to be in. And I think United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia both have a vision where they want to be and drive their current action as to achieve it. And we, as Israelis, can learn something from our neighbors as well. And you know, the borderlines in the Middle East do not align according to different ethnic group or even different religions. The main borderlines in the Middle East are not drawn, you know, on atlas maps. And the most important borderlines distinguish between those who seek peace, real peace of relations of peace and justice and equality and cooperation, and those who support violence and fundamentalist supremacy. And in this central division, we are partners together, and we must act together. And your presence here with us today demonstrate this very well. So again, thank you very much. And together we shall bring peace. We must.